everyone, and welcome to our first ever Hort-Talk Live. I'm here at the National Plant Show 2023 in the seminar area. I'm Alex Jenkins, your host, and you're listening to episode 14 of an HTA podcast, Hort-Talk and Education in Apprenticeships. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by 4 very special guests, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Sarah Ashmore and I'm the Business Development Manager at Warwickshire College Group. We've got 6 different colleges and a university centre within our group, but most of you here will probably know us as Pershore College. We've got the 6 colleges, we run hundreds of courses and we run 55 different apprenticeships. And it's the apprenticeships today that we're here to talk about. Our apprenticeships are very broad and wide, but again, in keeping with today, we've got a number of horticultural and landscape apprenticeships, but we also run a number of engineering-based apprenticeships for the providers who are looking on a manufacturing side too. I'm on the business development side, so I'm going to answer questions to do with setup and levies and funding. Over to the hands-on WCG person in horticulture.
Thanks, Sarah. My name is Josh Eganwire. I am Head of Horticulture Curriculum and Commercial at Pershore College, part of WCG. And my role is very varied and it encompasses looking after our wholesale nursery and garden centre on site, but also looking after curriculum development and bringing together the horticulture department to make sure that we can educate our students, whether they're on an apprenticeship or a full-time course, in the best possible way, and also work with industry very closely to make sure that what we're teaching our students is developing the next generation for our industry.
Hi, my name's Adam. I'm from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. My role is the Senior Training Consultant, but basically I'm a gardener come trainer. So my role is looking at the strategic training of our staff. We're in 150 countries. With staff around the world maintaining the war graves of World War I, World War II soldiers and casualties. The other hat that I've got on today is I am the chair of the Horticulture Trailblazer. Do we know what the Trailblazer does? Anyone?
Lots of heads shaking.
Yeah. So basically every apprenticeship has to have a Trailblazer organisation that monitors and sets up the actual standard. So I chair the horticulture one. It's a voluntary group of people. Within the group, we have colleges, we have companies, we have people that have just got really strong interest, and we actually shape what they look like. And we organise with IFATE, the education department, to review and update the apprenticeship. So it is voluntary, and we are funded by companies, organisations that help feed that. So it really is your opportunity. And if anyone wants to join the Trailblazer, give us a shout and we can bring you in.
Hi everyone, I'm Victoria Theander. I'm the Assessor in Horticulture from Lackham College, and I joined education in 2019, and hopefully I play a part on the Trailblazer group, on the subcommittee, so I can put my input on what skills and knowledge and behaviours should be part of that standard. But also, if you want change, you have to be part of it. As horticulturalists, we've been fighting climate change for a long time, looking at sustainability, and it's now about trying to bring that into education and work with industry to see how we formulate that curriculum.
Thank you. And thank you all very much for agreeing to be our expert guests on our first ever Hort-Talk Live. So this isn't actually our first podcast episode on apprenticeships, but we're very lucky to have you all here to give us a completely different insight on apprenticeships from an educational provider perspective. So I'm going to start by taking advantage of that perspective and ask what you think are the key benefits of apprenticeships for the horticultural industry.
So I think one of the biggest thing is now the government has changed the legislation. So the Post-16 Technical Skills Act, which was legislated last June, gives industry a voice. Hence the Trailblazer Group. You have a voice with the Trailblazer Group to say what you would like taught as part of your industry sector. And that's massive. You've never been given a voice before. And I think that's really exciting. So you are developing your own staff to the own skills that you are developing as part of that Trailblazer Group. So that's a massive benefit to the apprenticeship.
And I think adding on to top of that, I have obviously two hats on. I look after the commercial nursery and the education side as well. From an employer's point of view, seeing the calibre of students that come in on some of the apprenticeships is incredible, and it's so enjoyable having them come to work with us on the nursery, even for just their block releases. The level of interest that they have and the skill that they learn by being out in the workplace, especially, for example, the level 3 crop technician, where they're working with some really good employers, large nurseries. It's a delight to have them on the nursery because they get such a fantastic level of experience rather than being in a full-time course, for example.
I think for me as well, it builds into that learning culture you might want in your organisation. I think where you've got people coming in, fresh people coming in, and interacting with different people at colleges, different providers, it can feed into the wider team. And I think we also need to think about apprenticeships not just as that entry-level course, but actually the opportunity to progress. And again, that builds in your organisation or company.
It's about the retention, isn't it? Recruitment and retention.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I was going to bring in. I think since before COVID and especially after COVID, so many companies lost so many members of their staff, and everyone has been struggling to recruit and then to retain their workforce. So this is the additional route to finding members of staff. This is take young people who have a genuine interest in the industry and go the apprenticeship route in, because if they're signing up to an apprenticeship, then they want to already be in the industry. But lots of people just think, I'll immediately go straight to advertising for full-time, part-time roles. Think about all of the opportunities that are available in apprenticeships. And young people don't always like a lot of change very quickly. And if you're offering a level 2 onto a level 3, level 4, 5, 6, you can obviously hold on to that member of staff for up to 6 years in their training. So it's a great way to bring new people in.
A really key aspect of the apprenticeship is the relationship between the educational provider and the employer. So what can we do as an industry to harness these connections?
I think one of the things that's really important is actually there is flexibility out there. We've got a couple of providers on the panel here, but there is different models out there. So that relationship between you as the company and the provider, I always say there's a triangle. You've got to have the right student, the right apprentice, the right provider, and then you as an organisation have to have the right setup within that space. But there is different models. So we all might be familiar with the standard day release, but there is block release. There is some providers that do 100% in the workplace, and you've got a tutor that comes out to your workplace, so you've got them there continuously. Different models work in different situations depending on what your organisation is and how it's structured. But there is flexibility there, and I think that sometimes gets missed.
We've certainly found that the block release coming out a week at a time has been a real big benefit, and we've got a great number of employers now, and particularly for the crop technician course, there's a great range of employers that we work with that all came about from a group called the Midland Regional Growers Group. So this course has developed with us as a direct response to the employer saying to the college, this is what we want from you. Can you do it? And we've obviously been able to deliver that for them. And it means now that course is geared up to exactly what our local employers want, as opposed to us, having a few meetings, running a course and not really having that continual involvement all the time. And that's really benefited the students, but it also is in benefiting those employers because they are using the apprenticeships as a way of recruiting and training their own staff, and which many of them do then stay in that business and continue on and go through then into management roles.
I think one of the most important things is that you're all business managers. You're inviting someone in to take part in your business, so you have to make sure that you like that relationship. So, do your homework, do some background reading and research on the training provider, give them a course if you like them. A lot of what we do in our industry is camaraderie, personalities, characters. And that's a massive part of the apprenticeship now. A lot of it is about behaviours of your apprenticeship in your business. That's exactly the same thing for the training provider. It's about our behaviours. Do we communicate? Are we consistent? Are we reliable? Are we prepared to help you achieve? So it's really important to do that little bit of research on your training provider, even if it means going to a different training provider in a different area and saying, what would you recommend? What should we be looking for? So even though I'm in Wiltshire and maybe you're in Warwickshire, you might want to say to me, well, Vic, can you give me some advice? What do I need to look for in a really good training provider? A very important part of the apprenticeship is the 10-week review. When your assessor will come out and they will assess your student, the employer will be there, and that's your input. We'll ask you a lot of advice. We'll ask for your guidance and your engagement on that student's learning, and that's how we build that relationship. So it's really important. Be very wary of who you invite into your business. And it's not just training providers you bear that in mind for, it's also clients. So take the same principles when you're looking for a training provider.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even like in my organisation, this last 2 weeks, we're looking at putting new apprentices into a site. And we've had 3 different providers effectively come down and interview. They've walked the site with us. They've discussed their model, how they're going to do it. Once they've all finished, we then sat down as a management team and had a conversation about which assessor, tutor, and which organisation gave us the best feel for that site. And I think, you can feel empowered because at the end of the day, you are the client. So you can feel empowered to have a few providers look around and see what works out best for you.
I think sometimes the employer isn't aware that they've got that kind of power, though, in the apprenticeship situation, and actually to know that you've got that flexibility and that relationship you build with the educational provider is really important.
I think that's been a massive switch that we've seen in our education system for technical skills now. It is all with you. It's industry-led and you've got a massive voice, but we're not seeing you use it. We want to see you use your voice a lot more. We're here to serve you. We're here to fill that skills gaps. Make us work for our money, because that's what we are for you. You're our clients. Just like you have clients. If you weren't doing your work for your client, you wouldn't get paid. So we want to do the same for you. We're here to serve you.
You heard it here first from Vic. Make us work for our money. Speaking of money, shall we have a little bit of a conversation about the levy, which is always a bit of a sore point. So what are the key points we need to consider about the levy that we might not think about? And do we want to explain it a bit more? And I'm going to look directly at Sarah now, because she's the expert on this one.
Okay, right. So I'll try to do this as quickly as possible in the smallest amount of words. If you are an organisation that have an annual wage bill under £3 million, then you will qualify for an apprentice to have the training element of the apprenticeship done. So that is what we've been talking about, either the 1 day a week at college or the blocks of release for the education. So if you have a wage bill under £3 million a year, then you will qualify. If you take on an apprentice aged 16 to 18, you would get 100% of that apprenticeship training funded by the government. You have to set up a simple apprenticeship service account, you reserve the funding, and then the training element is completely covered. If you have a wage bill greater than £3 million a year, then 95% of that wage bill, 95% of that apprenticeship will still be covered by the government, but you will also be paying into what's called the levy pot, and that is, I think, 0.5% of your wage bill is sitting in a pot. That pot expires every 2 years, so if you're paying into that pot as a business, you want to be using that pot of money to fund apprenticeships. And as I say, if you run out of money on that pot, the government will continue to pay 95% of the cost of the apprenticeship. Also, a point that came up earlier was if you are a large organisation and you're not using your levy pot, you can actually give it away. So you could give it away to micro and small organisations to fund 100% of their apprenticeships. I should mention, if you are employing someone over the age of 19, you are liable for 5% of that, 5% of the cost of that apprenticeship. But your local council, so certainly in Warwickshire, you can go to Warwickshire County Council and they will cover that additional 5%. But generally, for an average apprenticeship, even if you were covering that 5%, it would just be a few £100 for the entire for the apprenticeship. So hope that gives you, in a nutshell, about the levy. So if you are a big company, use it or lose it. Lots of money goes back into the government each year by organisations that are not employing these fantastic young apprentices. And if you're a small organisation, yippee, you get the training element completely funded via the levy reserve.
Thank you. So we have some significant apprenticeships available within horticulture at the moment. In fact, we've got some really new ones as well. So what are some of the key ones to mention and why?
So definitely, if we've got commercial growers here, and I should imagine a lot of you are, is the level 3 crop production. So automatically your minds might go to agriculture. Actually, there's ornamental horticulture within that, and that's a really good qualification. That's only just come out for release. So for us, as a training provider, we'll be launching that hopefully from January 2024. But that's a very good qualification. I'll pass you over to Adam because you really want to promote the next one. You worked really hard for that one.
Well, I think it's important to just acknowledge the level 2 horticulture operative is, if you like, our biggest seller. It's the most popular apprenticeship within the horticulture sector. But we do have a new apprenticeship coming. It's been a long time and a lot of work's been going into it. It launches next September with open awards, and that's the level 5 technical manager qualification. So it's the first time we've had something past level 3 in horticulture from a practical point of view. I suppose the next nearest might be something like the M-Hort or something like that, but it should be a really interesting one. The content is really, really interesting. And also, some of you might be interested, the level 5 at the moment, open awards are recruiting for writers. So people to actually write the learning material, the assessments. So if that intrigues anyone and they want to know more about it, again, come and find me afterwards and I'll tell you about it. But for us, that's a really, really important one because we know there is a big gap at that level. If we go through FE education, we come to level 3, and unless you want to do a degree, there is a ceiling there. So this level 5, and what we've had in conversations is very much big organisations, local authorities and some places like that. It is part of their retention strategy where they can't potentially pay more money to staff, managers, but they can actually support them through an education to upskill to, effectively a degree level qualification.
And because I do sit on the Trailblazers management group, I can confirm the amount of hard work that has gone into that level 5, and Adam has done an incredible job on that as well.
It's a team effort.
No, I just want to, I want to say thank you. Oh, yes.
There we are, look, bit praise.
Very well deserved.
He's very humble.
Yeah, and obviously today we're talking about horticulture, but you need to think about your whole organisation. I know in ours we've got apprentices in finance, in communications. We're here to talk about horticulture, but actually, there's a lot that goes in other roles in a horticulture business that you might want to consider.
Retail, HR, exactly. So let's just have a quick chat about the biggest challenges that we actually face. So what are the challenges to getting starts on these apprenticeships? Is it a lack of interest? Is it a lack of available providers or awarding bodies, or is it a reluctant uptake from employers?
I think there's just a huge amount of ignorance over education. I think one of the biggest problems I face is that people are putting job adverts out there and they're automatically expecting those skills to be there. So they'll put a job advert out and they'll expect applicants to apply. Those skills aren't there. and it all starts with education. And if we can just change that culture within business to realise it all starts with education, we'll see a lot more support for training providers come in, for educators, and hopefully that'll turn in the circle where we need that engagement to come from.
I think for me, one of the other considerations is the government level for what the minimum salary is for apprentice is pitiful, I would say. And that's a really big thing. If you're marketing your apprenticeship on the lowest band you're allowed, I wouldn't sign up for it. So we need to be sensible about how we're marketing these apprenticeships. And again, we can enrich an apprenticeship as an organisation. We can choose to how we market it and how we enrich it. But I think we need to think about that salary level really carefully. Because like I say, if they can earn more at McDonald's, they're going to earn more at McDonald's. And we need to be honest with that. That's, it might not be a career choice, but if you're 17, 18, you're not necessarily thinking about a career at that point. We need to think about how we market it really, really carefully and the level we put in. We don't market our apprentices we take at that base level because it's undermining for the apprentice within a group setting as well. And it can, easily be seen as cheap labour, which that is not what an apprentice is.
I would agree with all of that completely, but I think a lot of it as well almost starts at home. It's a problem with our industry generally that horticulture is not valued as a profession. It is seen as gardening. And similarly to apprenticeships, go and do an apprenticeship because you're good with your hands, you want an outside job. It isn't seen as being a high enough level of qualification. But actually, if you start off on the level 2 apprenticeship and can make your way onto a level 3 apprenticeship, like I was saying earlier, you end up with a really good quality member of your team that you'll want to retain or want to continue putting through various bits of training. And there needs to be a bit of a mindset shift with parents and with schools. The schools thing is slowly starting to happen, but trying to change people's attitudes to not only our industry, but that an apprenticeship is actually a very valid and worthwhile entry route into the system that ticks a lot of boxes for many employers over them having any other type of qualification.
I was just going to say, I think as well as people in horticulture, we all need to talk about the positives, be realistic on the negatives, but where we can outreach, where we can offer work experience. There's so many times I've heard of people go on work experience in their GCSEs or whatever, and then they sign on for an apprenticeship. So it's thinking about the whole journey. Can't just put an advert out and expect people to come along anymore. I think it is such a competitive market out there across all the levels. So I think that outreach, it's kind of incumbent on all of us to do that outreach piece. Again, that's something that we're doing as an organisation, really trying to celebrate the achievements of our staff, but also the diversity of what we do and the social reward of what we do. And I think that's really important for all of us to buy into as the horticulture sector.
I think a really good advertisement for apprenticeships is quite often when you speak to apprentices that have started at that lower level, they want to go on to a high level apprenticeship. They want to continue doing apprenticeships because actually they've got so much from it. And that's a really key message actually, when they've enjoyed it that much, when they've got enough from it that they want to continue learning that way. So, shall we go on to audience questions? Has anyone got any questions for our panel today?
Hello. I just wanted to ask your advice in the positions you are to go back to employers and to discuss within management how we go about trying to shift that mindset. You've made really good points and we sort of agree with what you're saying, but from a business perspective, how could we, from the inside, try to change the mindset in particular with salaries and retention? I think you're right that there are a lot of views on younger folk as just sort of, we'll get them weeding and, we'll get them doing this without maybe the thought of where they want to be and how we can entice them to stay and to grow within our companies. Do you have any advice at all?
Yeah, I think that comes down to what would be your reviews with the apprentice, the training provider. The employer has to engage on the programme. So you'll be nurtured by the training provider through that apprenticeship. we'll be telling you what knowledge, skills and behaviours need to be covered at each 10-week stage of that review. And we'll be using the criteria set out from the standard. So we're there guiding you all the way. One benefit that I've seen working on the apprenticeship is we're not just skilling the apprentice, we're skilling the employer. Because it may be at least 10, 15 years since that employer did their qualification, and they're learning from it. And some of the employers, with the handouts we give, the talks we give, the PowerPoints, they say, oh, actually, I'm going to use that as a toolbox meeting for my staff. We organise industry workshops at college, so we've just had Still come in, JSP Health and Safety, Toro come in. And it's quite often that the employers will say, oh, do you mind if I send a couple of my other employers along? Say, yeah, no problem, come along. And that's upskilling their workforce because we're just one big family as part of the apprenticeship. So that's why, do your homework, do your research, choose the right training provider.
Yeah, I think the apprenticeship standard itself really maps out what is going to be covered. Like I say, the knowledge, skills and behaviour that's going to be covered. I think that's really useful document to talk to managers about in terms of that sort of well-rounded person you're going to end at the end. It's easy to say, oh, you know, just write a business case saying how good apprenticeships are, there's lots of evidence there, and stick that in front of managers. Like you say, they've got to buy into it. And again, it's not... The apprentice could be someone that's there 18 months. It's someone that could be there 18 years. It depends on your management team as to how holistic they want to look at this, and is it something they want to do to enrich their workforce. And I think, you know, like I say, you can write a business case, but you know your team. What I say is the evidence is there of how successful they can be. It's out there in the ether. You've got the apprenticeship standard that really clearly maps out what's required. So there's those various elements. And you can look at benchmarking. For the salary point of view, again, what we did when we were looking at the new ones we're looking at setting up, we're benchmarking to see what the other apprenticeship opportunities are in the area. Because we've got to, you know, like with anything, if you're not meeting the local market, you're not going to get anyone. So again, looking on the various recruitment sites to understand what the actual going rate is in your area.
I can certainly vouch for the benefits that it brings to the team, because having employed an apprentice at the college, through the college on our wholesale nursery, it's not only upskilled a member of the team, but it's brought enormous impact to the others on the team, because they've all been helping out a little bit with the education, and they've got a little WhatsApp group for pests and diseases, and all of a sudden some members of staff that couldn't even ever identify that there was any aphids on something, for example, they just walk blindly past it and now going, oh, I've spotted this. And it's, you know, the apprentice has done their pest and disease bit, and it's encouraged all the others to do it, and it's actually had a really good impact on the rest of the team, and it's raising the standard generally across the nursery because of these the apprentices that we're employing, and it's had a big impact. But I appreciate you've got to try and sell that without having any physical hard evidence, but you can get them to come and chat to me, that's fine, that's no problem. I can happily help with that, because it's I've already seen the benefit in our business.
I mean, education's infectious, isn't it? If you've got people that are really enthused in what they're doing and they're enjoying it, it spreads to others in the team. And it is, and that's, again, it's that cultural piece of trying to get that more energy within a team, maybe. Can be really, really positive side effect.
I was just going to say to anyone who has not had an apprentice in the business, obviously we're just a couple of the training providers who are out here, but it costs you absolutely nothing to contact a training provider and say, come and see me. As we said, you can see as many as you want. We come in, talk through what we would actually offer. I always send links out with things like the salary details so they can see what competitors in the local area are doing. But it's not, don't feel, oh gosh, if I invite them in, I absolutely have to commit. See lots of training providers. It's one meeting or one phone call or one online meeting to get some basics. And then you'll build up a bit of your own internal knowledge about what the apprenticeship is and make a decision on who the right provider is for you. So it's a really simple process to kick off. And I think it's frequently a lack of knowledge that stops people moving forward. So find out who your local providers are, drop them an email, and we'll all get back to you as quickly as possible.
So I think the summary of all this is, why should I have an apprentice? It's why aren't you having an apprentice? No cheers for that one.
Any more questions before we move on?
Hi. You know how you're saying about don't have to pay the baseline sort of salary? Yeah, so if it's covered by the council, if you're not paying the baseline, do they still cover the full cost, or do you have to contribute as a business more to that?
As we said earlier, the apprenticeship, that's the training side with your training provider, is effectively completely paid for, so you don't need to worry about that at all. However, you do need to pay the apprentice for a minimum of 30 hours, a maximum of 40 hours for the duration of the apprenticeship, and you have to pay them holiday. The minimum rate is £5.28 an hour, but as we did say, if you know you can go down to McDonald's and get more pay, then you want to be paying at least the minimum. So I think the 18 plus is £7.49 an hour. So I would consider going to at least the minimum £7.49 an hour. But admittedly, depending on the apprenticeship in the area, because across lots of different areas, a lot of young people are very happy to be starting on that £5.28 an hour. Maybe not horticulture, maybe they do want to get more money, but I set up a lot of engineering apprenticeships where they see that £11,000 salary as par for the road because that company is actually training them and they're going to get a higher qualification out of it. But yeah, you do have to pay a minimum of £5.28, but we would recommend you pay more for at least 30 hours, no more than 40 hours a week, and you have to pay holiday too. They are on an apprenticeship contract with you. So during the apprenticeship, that is the contract. And then at the end of the contract, you choose whether you take them on as a permanent employee. But both parties can walk away after that. And also, no one wants to see an apprenticeship contract broken, but ultimately for some of you who haven't had apprentices on board, if it doesn't work out, then there is the ability to terminate the contract. But we're talking happy stories here, and most of them are happy stories.
And don't just think young. 10% of our apprenticeship at Lackham College have got degrees. Another 65%, even 70% are people over 25. So we only have 10% of our students 16 to 18 years old. So when we talk about young people, it's not young people joining apprentices. And a lot of those people are already employed by companies that have never done a qualification. We've just had two 42-year-olds complete a level 2 apprenticeship, been working in the industry for 15 years with no qualification, and they felt that in their time of life with families, they want to go up in a pay grade. The only way to do that is get a formal qualification behind them, and they nailed it. Both of them came out with distinctions. So that shows and demonstrates how the apprenticeship does work in industry.
Fantastic. Any more questions?
Thanks, guys. You're doing a really good job of this. I'm really enjoying it. So as someone that's done a higher level apprenticeship in marketing and comms, which is it's a great experience to be able to work and learn at the same time, I think everyone here is absolutely sold on the fact that apprenticeships are awesome. But like that level of pay, do we really think that people, does that offer enough of a door? And what's the flexibility and how can we get that improved? Like, who's responsible for that? Because it's almost outrageous.
To put it a little bit into context, if you look at the apprenticeships, again, I'm going back to that level 3 crop technician all the time, but you go back to that, and all of the employers have found that they are offering 10.42 or 10.45 an hour. That the minimum wage for over 21s, isn't it? Yeah, the over 21s, because that is the going rate to try and encourage those apprentices in, which is raising the bar, like Sarah was saying, and that's almost double what the actual minimum apprenticeship wage is, and that is what certainly the employers that I've come to know are doing to try and make sure that not only do they raise the bar but are attractive as well, because it's a problem that such a low salary. It can only get better in one respect, can't it? But it's not attractive at all.
No, and I mean, that's the base rate across all apprenticeships as well. So it's not like it's different for different sectors, and that's the government decision. But it definitely isn't. If you go and look in the marketplace, there's very few companies that are marketing them at that level, particularly in the horticulture sector, but in other sectors, most are looking at, like I say, not only the wage, but actually, again, what other enrichment they can put as a package together. Because again, if we're doing, a bit like bringing apprentices to a show like today, that enrichment really develops that person. And if you can sell that package, so, ultimately, a lot of people will look at the money. And I think it was an interesting point that was made about the older apprentices, career changers. My last year of sort of working in a college, most of the RHS courses I was delivering was career changers. Very few were people for the hobby. It was a career change. And we're seeing that in apprenticeships as well. And the benefit they bring is transferable skills. So I know I've had apprentices that have got project management qualifications. I mean, horticulture skills with project management, happy days, And so we need to think about that. But again, it comes down to, if you're going to try and attract a career changer, the package you put together needs to be sensible if someone's going to look at it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is we've got to individualise people's learning journeys. I mean, we celebrate biodiversity in horticulture. Yay! Pollinators, different plants, wildflowers. We're not very good at it with human beings. We're really cruel to one another. We've got to celebrate people's individuality a lot more. And that's one thing that's very wary of training providers. And another good point. So when you're looking for your training provider, make sure they're not blanketing the duration of the apprenticeship to maximise their funding. So if you've got approved prior learning and they'll do an individual skill scan with that student, it's part of my job role, we'll look at what prior knowledge they've got. And if we feel we can reduce that programme down, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, we'll do that. And again, it's a conversation. You're all in charge of your own destiny, of your own business. We're here to serve you. If you think, okay, I've got a career changer, they're not going to want to be on the programme for 24 months. And if that training provider says to you, are we going to take it to the maximum duration, you've picked the wrong training provider. Because someone 30, 40 years old should really be aiming to finish that qualification within 16 to 18 months. So again, it's another important point. As an employer, you should be asking and looking for. We don't accept anyone on a level 3 apprenticeship without some sort of level 2 qualification, because we also don't believe you can go in as a supervisor apprentice without knowing how the job works or the skills that are needed. So when we do that level 3, we reduce that programme down to 24 months instead of 3 years, because they have got that approved prior learning. So that's another good point. So if you are looking for an older apprentice, just bear in mind they are not really going to want to stick on that programme for the maximum 2 years.
It all comes down to what we were talking about earlier and about that mindset. An apprenticeship is not a cheap form of labour. An apprenticeship is a form of training, but what you're gaining from this is an employee and you're training someone at the same time. And if you do a side-by-side comparison with the level of training you're getting on an apprenticeship with the same amount of training you might give to an employee, a current employee, it's cost effective. And I think that's what we all agree, that an apprenticeship is a really cost effective way of training someone, but it's not cheap labour. It's about that development opportunity that you get as a business and the employee essentially gets as well. So I'm going to do a quick summary. I think we can kind of summarise up this conversation in the 3 R's. It's about retention. It's about keeping the staff that we've already got. It's about the career changers. It's about giving our industry an opportunity to keep the people that are already there and engaged and allowing to deliver training for them. It's about recruitment. We all know how difficult that is at the moment. So it's getting young people, new people into the industry, being able to give them those opportunities as well. And it's about relationships. So building the relationships with our staff, with our new staff, between all the stakeholders in the apprenticeship, the employers, the educational providers and the apprentices as well. So I just want to say thanks once again to Adam, Victoria, Sarah and Josh for joining me today. Thank you to our audience for their participation as well. I've been Alex Jenkins, your host, and you've been listening to Hort-Talk Live, episode 14, in Education in Apprenticeships. Thank you for listening and stay safe.